When you upgrade the phone, you lose the old features. You cannot return to that. So I think there's a very similar thing that's happening with us humans.
So when you do that with a phone and you're like, oh no, this thing's just crashing all the time, you can roll back to your previous operating system.
You cannot.
You can. You often can.
No, you
well, you can.
Not in today's.
But that's purely
modern phones.
Well, no, but you can. You can definitely do it.
You could potentially do it
if you have the knowledge. You can
yes,
reset it.
You're absolutely right.
So the only reason you wouldn't be able to do it easily, like lots of software allows you to, nice and easily. Some software might not give you that option. They don't want you to do that. So that's where the cannot comes in. But the can is
Samsung phone, for instance.
You can if you have the know-how, you can just like reset it and install the previous version you had. If it was a piece of software or if it was the operating system. But the question is, can you do it with yourself?
I guess that, our minds are so plastic that we can change who we are today, maybe not in an instance, but with the new information. And I'll be going back and forth, throughout my life. Sometimes I've got really strong beliefs about one idea, and then I've completely changed my mind. But then there's a new information that becomes available that actually allows me to revert to my original thinking. But that's one of the things I've also noticed in me. We tend to forget how we thought a couple of months back because we...
So I don't think you're reverting. I think what you're doing is you're moving to one idea, but then you're upgrading your operating system again in a way that holds your previous beliefs.
That's right.
But you're not reverting. I don't think you can revert. So this is my hypothesis. I think it's like what's like the Matrix. What's seen cannot be unseen. I think that's in the Matrix. Maybe not. But it's the same idea. It's like once you've entertained that idea and that's your new operating system, you can't ever go back.
You're right.
It's like, and I think maybe that's the concept of Pandora's box. And it's the idea of curiosity killed the cat. Once you've upgraded, and it's not necessarily an upgrade actually. That's maybe the wrong word.
Because maybe
it's a change. It's once you've allowed yourself to look at that and entertain that, as build that into your structure of view of how you how you see things, your map of meaning. It's there then, and you can't ever go back. You can't ever revert.
But every information builds on another information that we already store in our system. So it is an upgrade in a way. Every single new information that you learn every single day will giving you a little bit of an upgrade, will giving you a little bit more of a perspective on the world, and can change the way you think in an instant.
I guess what I mean when it's what I don't like about the word upgrade is it implies that it's an improvement, that it's a step forward, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a step forward.
It could be detrimental for us potentially if we get the wrong information, if we get some sort of wrong propaganda, because we're so easily programmable. And if somebody's able to convince you that they're right, even if they're lying with the way they're speaking, this can have a potential negative impact on the rest of your life. So no, I absolutely agree. But I still believe it's always an upgrade. In my mind, upgrade...
Yeah, no, there is a context, there is an aspect in which it is, because you're continually adding to the information. You've still got somewhat that information that you had, but you've yeah, it's a development anyway.
Yes.
It's a transition to a new way.
And you're always becoming a better self, I guess. Even if sometimes you are going the wrong direction, I think that the fact that you're constantly building on the other building blocks, even if you're, straying off the right path for a while, ultimately, as long as you're continuously learning, you will divert back to the right path. This is the way I think.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's the way I think. That's the bit of upgrade that I react to. When I look at people's lives and how they roll out, just having more knowledge and more experience doesn't necessarily improve them as people. And so what you're suggesting is that ultimately it's an upgrade because it brings you to be a better person and and I don't necessarily see that's how things work out.
I did say something very important that you've missed.
Sorry, on you go.
As long as you continue learning and as long as your goal is to become a best version of yourself. So if this is not your goal, then I don't really know. You could potentially go anywhere.
But how you frame it depends on how you see what the best version of yourself is.
Oh,
so that's all influenced by the upgrade, the new operating system that you have.
It's all bias.
So, and it's all subjective as well.
Yes.
Because you could say, well, I did become the best version of myself. I wanted to be really powerful and be remembered in history.
In my mind.
I was Adolf Hitler, so it's like, hey, I was... that was success for me. Like, who are you to say that wasn't successful?
That's subjective take on it.
Well, of course, because it is subjective.
Yeah.
But we would both say, well, I don't think that was an upgrade, Adolf. I think you were a better person previously, earlier on in your life. So,
well, perhaps you were a better person because you were driven by different motives.
Well, the operating system's different. All those things, but it's not necessarily an upgrade. That's my point.
It can go either way. It could go either an upgrade from the moral standpoint, or it can go the other way. It could have a detrimental impact.
Yes.
If you start being driven by money alone, and you'll start ignoring all the other things of life. But I think that it is a human nature to be good. There's this show that they basically show a little young children puppets, and there was a nice puppet and there was this really horrible puppet. So the horrible puppet came in and damaged everything, and after that they gave very young children these two puppets, and they let them to choose which puppet they want to play with, and all the children chose a nice puppet. None of them chose the nasty puppet.
But I think it's
there's
the
a
meaning.
reason why I'm speaking about very young children. Mm-hmm. Is because this is how we are programmed. We're pre-programmed to be on the lookout for good guys and treat them as a part of our pack. And anyone who's not playing the ball, who's nasty, we don't want to associate ourselves with these people. And as you grow older, as you build this,
I would argue that that's not true, and I'll tell you why. I don't know that it's not true, but here's some information which would bring that into question. So where did the program coming from? I would agree with you that the children are programmed to pick the good one, but I don't think they're programmed by nature. I think they're programmed by society. And why? What I would say is, so there was a woman who did studies with very young children, and she showed them scary clowns and evil-looking things and all this different stuff. And the really young ones,
they didn't bother.
They didn't bother. So for them, whatever you showed them, that would become normality.
But there's a but.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about faces. You're talking about expressions, all these things. This is something we have to learn. But I'm talking about certain behaviors that are, we recognize innately. And there are certain types of behaviors that we want to associate ourselves with. Mm-hmm. And there are certain that we're not. And that's why I think that in this particular case, I've heard of that study as well. And you're absolutely right when it comes to these expressions. But this study that I told you about is about the way they behave, how they mess up, damage everything. And I know that very young children, it's really, really difficult to pinpoint these things with them. But it's not like, the certain percentage of children chose to play with the nice puppet. They all chose to do it. So I'm not sure if the study was done, with a large enough group to see whether or not this is definitely the case. But that led me to believe that we are innately good. Innately, we are craving to have an interaction with the good, positive people, rather than, looking for this negative, unless, there are some mental health concerns that are that have to be taken into account as well. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. And
well, let's carry on, because I don't think it proves what you think it proves.
Okay.
So, what's the consequences for the small child in choosing the one that they know would be the unfavourable one by their social group? Because they are aware of that. They are aware of what's kind of expected, and what's the because they have all these associations of the good and what brings about certain effects, because they are little sponges for all this information that's round about them.
They are.
So they have been programmed. You're right, but it's society that's programmed them.
I think it's programmed in genes for us to be on the lookout for people who can potentially be helpful to us, for people that we can corroborate with.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's why. Why would you choose a nasty puppet? Somebody who will destroy everything. Somebody who's not going to play the game. Somebody who's not going to be a good team player.
But that's why you wouldn't choose it.
Yeah,
that's it's not exactly because it's that's why you
exactly
wouldn't choose
it. Okay, maybe I haven't put it across the right way, but that's what I intended. All right off the get-go, that we are programmed by Mother Nature to be on the lookout from the very young age for the people that could benefit us, and we could benefit. So we're not going to be associating ourselves with the nasty people that could potentially bring harm and destruction, to our life. We'd rather be on the lookout, for people who can help us, who can improve our lives.
So what does that do to your argument for what we're discussing? So we were discussing the choices that people make. You said that people are inherently good.
Yes.
But what you've argued isn't that they're inherently good. What you've argued, you say that your point is that they're inherently selfish. They're out for what benefits them. That's what your argument actually says. It doesn't say they're inherently good.
I don't know, because I think that would be, in my opinion, an indication that this is the type of person you're on the lookout for. This is the type of person you want to associate yourself with, and innately you know that in order to have this reciprocal relationship, you have to behave the similar way. So that's, in my mind, what's happening. I think that you are attracted to these type of people, but then you innately know that you would have to act the same way. You cannot be selfish. You are selfish in the way.
Well, ultimately, it's beneficial to you to act in this way. So you do it
to both of us, to each one of us. It's beneficial for overall survival. It's selfish, but it's not. It's a mutual agreement.
I'm not saying selfish like as in immoral and bad. I'm not saying it in that way. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not. I guess you got to define what is good. But we've already defined that Hitler wasn't good. So we've already defined that. And what you're talking about doesn't necessarily... so what you're saying is that if you just follow your new upgraded operating system, it will take you somewhere good. That's your hypothesis.
No, sorry. What I meant to say, probably right at the get-go, that from the very beginning, we are programmed to be a good people. Whatever happens throughout your life will ultimately indicate what kind of person you will become. But I believe strongly that innately we are all good inside. It's just, the experiences that we have throughout our life can lead us to become a really nasty and horrible people, like in the case of a Hitler. Whether or not there was some sort of, mental health issues, substances addiction, and all the other bits and bobs, that's completely another story. What I'm trying to convey is that I strongly believe that innately we're all good, with very small exceptions.
So why do you strongly believe that? Because you've not given me an argument for why we're innately good.
What I said, giving this example about these puppets, it showed that very, very young children, they innately know who they want to associate themselves with.
But it's nothing to do with goodness, though.
It is.
How?
Why wouldn't they, associate with the nasty puppet?
Because it's not in their interests. It's not beneficial to them.
It's not only beneficial to them, it's not beneficial to nobody.
It's not beneficial to anybody else. I'm not sure if that comes into it. So it's, if they were to pick the evil puppet, it's not... They're benefiting somebody else in doing that. Like, I'm not saying it's definitely not true, but I don't know that
potentially harmful for them. So selfishness, you're right. Selfishness is in our genes. Mm-hmm. We are survival machines. So ultimately, the main goal of your survival is to make sure that you're fine and you're going to live as long and healthy life as possible. And because of that, you want to associate yourself with other people who are good. And what I think, it's just a hypothesis, maybe I'm wrong, but I do believe that this is part of our programming, that we are naturally good, because when we're good, we're going to be chosen by others as well. And in the groups, we're more likely to survive than individually.
I think what I find interesting is what you're defining as good is actually the opposite of what we usually define as good. So you're defining as good that you're going to act in your interest to preserve your evolutionary species and your genes and all the rest of it. That's not really what we define as good. What we define as good is usually you sacrificing yourself for the others. And that's the complete opposite of what you're saying.
But then again, it can come into play here as well, because you can sacrifice yourself for the right reason, for the right people. For instance, your children. So it's also deeply ingrained in our genes. So wouldn't you give up your life for your child?
Well, the argument is that a lot of people would, so it's not that good. Would you give up your life for a stranger? That would be seen as a higher good in some respects when you talk about goodness. Would you give up your life for your country?
I'll be honest, probably I wouldn't.
Would you give up your life for your country?
Probably not. Would you? I think that...
Depends on the context.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So give me a context where you would be willing to give up your life.
There was people who were invading, who were going to make lots of people's lives really hellish and miserable, like the Germans. I think in that circumstances, I probably would. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff at play.
You're a very noble person.
If I was living at that time, well, it's easy for me to say.
If you really believe in that, if you would really...
But there's another aspects as well, because it's not in a vacuum. There's all sorts of other things that play into it. And so if I was actually living at the time period, like First or Second World War, when that was happening, if I didn't do that, then there was lots of horrible consequences that would happen for me. If I didn't do that noble thing, there'd be lots of things that would push me towards doing it. Like, there's a white feather, or everybody's going to shun you in your society. And so not picking that bad mask is helped on for me, because socially I'm going to pay the consequences for that.
Yes, and I genuinely believe that people are too selfish, and many people will tell you that they'll give up their lives, in an instant. But the reality is, until that very moment, we just don't know. And I'm just trying to be honest with myself, and I'd rather be overly critical and say that I wouldn't than try to portray myself as, this guy who's so righteous and everything. It's like no, I think that I would think about my family. If my family would be at jeopardy, I think then, yes, I would definitely be willing to give up my life. But for the country as a whole, it depends. It completely depends on the reasons why they would expect me to die. If my life, if my death wouldn't really make any difference, I think it would be just stupid for me to
just now
to die.
But if you change your operating system, you might think quite differently.
Perhaps. But I think that this is a conversation for another time.
Yeah, I mean, to further the conversation, to move it on, you'd need to come to a shared agreement of what is good.
Yeah, I think that was really, really interesting for today.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to have to come back to this type of conversation next time as well, because this is...
We're always upgrading our operating system, so we can always...
Absolutely.
It's a journey of discovery from that perspective, for everyone, for us, but for others as well. We're all on that. That's one aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. So again, thank you so much for watching today. We hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.